Hi everyone, Jarrod here, and you guys have been asking for a lot of retro stuff, retro content, retro reviews, retro, and I'm here to deliver on that request. So what I wanted to do, I don't know if I'm going to make this a new series or anything like that. I'm sort of just testing the water, seeing how you guys react to this, if you like this. It's almost like a remembering series. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. But what I want to do is take maybe one or two games or maybe a series or something and just talk a little bit about why I remember either the game or the franchise. Maybe it was something was happening in my life at that time, or maybe there was a bunch of games that got released at the same time, and I don't know. We'll see. It's basically just going to be talking about just a game. And that's what we're going to start doing right now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. DIno Crisis. DIno Crisis was a really unique game when this came out because essentially the concept was, can we take Resident Evil and replace the zombies with a velociraptor? And that was pretty much it. You're getting hunted down by raptors, by T-Rexes, by all kinds of crazy stuff, but in the setting of a survival horror. Now, I don't want to go and review the game because I plan on actually doing that. I'm currently capturing footage for this. So instead, what I wanted to just say is, why do I remember this? Well, for one thing, I'm a big fan of dinosaurs. When I was a kid, I was just utterly in love with archaeology and paleontology and all of that. Jurassic Park was one of those movies. When I went to see it when I was younger, I just thought it was the most incredible thing ever. And so when I think I was reading EGM, or maybe it was PSM. Yeah, I think it was PSM. I was a really big fan of PSM back then. And I remember reading about DIno Crisis, about this game that was going to be coming out where the concept was to take Resident Evil, but again, to replace zombies and stuff like that with dinosaurs. And I was like, oh, that could be so cool, you know? But I was always wondering, like, how are they going to do it? Are they going to do it like Jurassic Park, where you're sort of like maybe in like enclosures or something like that with these beasts and you're getting hunted down? Like, I just didn't know how they were actually going to incorporate that. And believe it or not, one of the things was this came out in, I actually wrote down, August 31st, 1999. Why is that significant? Well, if you remember 1998 was the year of madness. That was the year Metal Gear Solid came out, Ocarina of Time came out, and Panzer Dragoon Saga came out. So it was a crazy, crazy year for gaming. And I remember when this got announced and this got released, I remember coming home, opening it up, playing. This is my original disc here. All my games are actually that I'm going to show you today are all the original ones. And I remember being blown away. It was genuinely creepy, man. Like, you would go near the side of like a building when you're inside a complex, and boom, a T-Rex would rip through the wall and try and eat you, and you had like a little mini boss fight. It was really, really cool. Some of the gameplay elements, you know, they had the same tropes as Resident Evil, so the controls were a little bit iffy, fixed camera angles, things of that nature. But I really liked this game. I thought this was a brilliant take on the survival horror concept. Now, what I wanted to mention also was, that was August, right? Like the last day of August. And keep in mind the release dates might be a little bit off, right? Just so, but I do remember it was definitely sometime around late August, early September. But why do I remember around that time period? Well, 1999. Do you guys remember what 9999 was? That was the launch of the Sega Dreamcast. So 9999. If this was released on August 31st, that means I had 9 days to enjoy the crap out of this before the Dreamcast hit. And the Dreamcast was really hyped for Sonic Adventure and Soul Calibur. Now, I remember coming home from work. I can't believe, yes, I actually was working at this point in time when all of this came out, which is insane. This bad boy, I don't know why I didn't grab my Dreamcast stuff, and anyway, whatever. I just grabbed a couple of PlayStation games. But this bad boy was also released on 9/9/99. And I was crazy hyped for this because of how much I enjoyed Final Fantasy VI, which was our Final Fantasy III on the Super NES, and also how much I really enjoyed Final Fantasy VII. So I was crazy hyped for this. And I remember blasting through this so quickly, like I think it was like 2 days or 3 days, like a couple of sittings, I blasted through DIno Crisis because I wanted to get to this. The problem was I was torn between this and all my friends and everybody coming over to check out Soul Calibur and Sonic Adventure. So it was like I wanted everybody to go away so that I could play more of this. But I actually managed. I managed to go through Final Fantasy VIII plus have a blast with the Sega Dreamcast. But again, one of the things that's so funny was that I have so many memories of this, of playing alone, all the lights off, and really getting immersed in my bedroom with this game. And I was all like, yeah, this is awesome. But now looking back, I remember, I was super rushed because I wanted to get to Final Fantasy VIII. I also wanted to get to all the Sega Dreamcast stuff. Now, something else. That was released on September 9th, 1999, alongside the Sega Dreamcast. All that stuff came out. But there was another game that got released, according to Wikipedia, on November 11th. And I do remember that these games fell like bam, 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 one after another after another. And if you were around and you were either working at that point in time or whatever, if you had the means to go and pick up some of these games, you'll most likely remember that it wasn't like today, or at least it didn't feel like it was today. It felt like every month you had tons of stuff. Like, I mean, tons and tons and tons of stuff. This late August, this and the Dreamcast all September, and then in November, that bad boy, bam, comes out. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Now, what was interesting with this was a different approach to the classic survival horror that we had experienced in Resident Evil 1, 2, and in DIno Crisis. With Resident Evil 3, it was almost like, okay, we want you to be alone, we want you to have that feeling of isolation, but we want to open up. We want to bring it out a little bit more so that you're in the city now. Because for both parts 1 and part 2, you're always thinking of yourself, like, well, if this virus gets out, well, especially in part 2 where it got it out and infected all of Raccoon City, you're sort of, well, what would it actually be like to go from one building to another building? And we got just a glimpse of that in Resident Evil 2. But with this, it was like, okay, now you're actually going to be exploring the city. Sure, we're going to make it a little bit linear so that, it's not an open world or anything like that. But it was much more action-based while remaining crazy creepy because you have this giant, unstoppable beast coming after you and stars every, couple of minutes. And so that was really something. But it was a big change to the series, especially after having just played DIno Crisis. And then you come on to this and you're like, oh, this feels different. This is creepy, but in a different way. All right. The following year, 2000, was a crazy year. We had the PlayStation launch on October 26th of 2000. We had, the month before, we had this bad boy pop up. Boom! Resident Evil 2. DIno Crisis 2. And that was primarily the series I wanted to talk about just because of all the other games that were out at that point in time. My nose is itchy. Scratch my nose. And this was very interesting because it followed what Capcom had done with Resident Evil 3. It was almost like a follow-up to Resident Evil 3 in a sense because they took the same characters and the same setting and everything like that. Everything that made DIno Crisis interesting, but they ran with it, and now it was almost like Resident Evil 3 where it was like non-stop dinosaurs chasing after you, and I absolutely loved this game. It has that same sort of creep factor as with Nemesis, but instead of one guy, you might have like a bunch of raptors coming after you, and you have to take them out and then move to the next location, take those ones out, and it had a very arcade sort of feel to it. This was a fantastic game, and I remember the same exact thing happening to me with Dino Crisis 2 as with Dino Crisis 1, where, like I said, this one was released September 29th, 2000. 1 month later, pretty much, on October 26, 2000, the PlayStation 2 launched. Now, if you remember that, there was a buttload of games that came out around that time. And right after the PlayStation 2 launched, and this was already out, I remember going crazy to finish this one so that I could jump on the PlayStation 2. And then what comes out on November 13th, 2000, just the following month? Whoop whoop, this guy, Final Fantasy IX. And this was crazy too. This was, I enjoyed 8, but 8 was sort of bittersweet to me because I wasn't really into that whole junction system and the fact that your Guardian Forces had to keep coming out every single time you had to watch the videos and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So with this one was neat because what the pitch was the best of the old meets the best of the new. And so I was really looking forward to this, and this didn't disappoint. This is one of the best Final Fantasies. I love this game. This is just fantastic. But I wanted to talk about Dino Crisis and just give you guys a little bit of sort of like my memories with the series and being rushed. I was so rushed with the series. Never really had the time to sort of sit down and just take it all in because at that point in time, there's just so many games that were coming out. It felt like on almost like a daily basis. Obviously it wasn't, but it just felt like that. It just felt like you were being bombarded with quality games. And keep in mind, this is just PlayStation, right? There was also N64, there was also Dreamcast, there was a lot of stuff coming out all around here. And then the next year we had the GameCube, we had the Xbox. I was just going to say the Xbox, the original Xbox. And it's funny, with Dino Crisis, if we go back to Dino Crisis, if I just take those two games out, this series, in my opinion, needs to come back. You notice I don't want to talk about Dino Crisis 3, because Dino Crisis 3, it was awful. Awful. I picked it up, played it for like, I don't know, 2 hours or so, and I was like, this is terrible. Like, I could not stand that game. So I want to talk about these two, and just the fact that I think it's time, I think it's overdue. I think Capcom needs to bring this back. And what's interesting is because of part 2, it sort of already was like an action game. So you know how everybody keeps saying with Resident Evil, oh well, you know, it's too much of an action game now, too much of an action game, too much of an action game. You need to follow this pattern. I actually think I enjoyed that more than I did with the slower paced one. Only because with dinosaurs, they're fast paced creatures, right? And just being bombarded with them, you're always on the edge of your seat. It had almost like a Resident Evil 4 sort of feel to it, where you never felt safe. You were always looking around, seeing, oh man, something's going to jump out at me at any moment, and then that's it. There's going to be tons of dinosaurs all around. And so I would love to see another Dino Crisis like this, or even this, even the slower style, the pure survival horror. I wouldn't mind that either. I would love to have these games come back. So Capcom, if you're listening, follow these two. Part 3 never existed. Let's just move that away. And come on out with another Dino Crisis. I think you guys are sitting on a really big series, and fans like me, it's time. Bring back Dino Crisis. So, thank you very much for watching, everyone. What are some of your memories with some of these games that I mentioned today, and in particular with the Dino Crisis series? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, and let me know what you think of this little feature, if you like taking a trip down memory lane, and that's it. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Do